things like the state construction assistance program. So to do this and be eligible for that, you've got to have all these in place or you're disqualified from that participation. So what the condition assessment is really doing is it's basically a requirement that the WAC actually requires that we use professional uh, people, which are architects and engineers, that come in and actually take a look at our facilities. They're typically structural, electrical, and mechanical engineers and architects that all are licensed by the state of Washington. And then they come in and basically conduct visual inspections of our equipment and then give us an assessment. That data is then put into the state system, which is the ICO system, and then that converts over to their building condition assessment. So our data is driving that. Our data is bigger because it comes in with some cost analysis and things like that, and life expectancies that the state doesn't look at. From this study, we get what's called a rough order of magnitude cost estimate. It's a very high level for our purposes of looking to see what our deferred maintenance costs are, how much long life cycle costing we have. So it gets into quite a bit of detail because these are professionals doing it. It also identifies corrective actions like the end of useful life, energy sustainability needs, major maintenance, deficiencies, and deferred maintenance are typically broke out into a period of life expectancy. They identify any life safety concerns that need to be addressed. They also look at the additional assessment needs that the district might have related to programs like CTE, food service, athletics, things like that. We can ask them to actually provide input on as well. They also look at not a deep dive into ADA requirements, but they'll identify accessibility issues that are current, as well as any code enforcement issues that need to be addressed. They also go into the structural assessments. In some cases, they dig into the seismic assessments, and that is a requirement of OSPI that we touch on those. In many cases, it's a brief touch that OSPI is looking at. In many schools, we'll go much deeper than that. And in some schools, we know it doesn't meet it, so there's no sense in paying for it. So the next topic is the pre-design and feasibility study. This is where we really go in and actually figure out, can we repair this building? What do we do if we replace it? So gets into looking at the infrastructure, the overall condition. In many cases, the ages kind of tell us that, you know, you got a whole lot of things that you got to do, like tear out all the infrastructure. They look at it from an architectural perspective as well as the civil needs and challenges on that side if we're going to build or do something different on there. They come in and they look at replacement or modernization options that exist for us. In many cases, our schools are beyond that opportunity. So they're assessing that. And they're basically coming in and saying, to do this, you're going to have a delivery model that, is this an occupied site to do the work? If not, and they start looking at how do we actually deliver that and still be able to keep classrooms in place if it's that type of work, if it's a renovation. So they provide us a lot of information. The other thing they get into is looking at the jurisdictional issues like permitting or the different unique things about the community. Like in Lakewood, it's oak trees. Everybody knows you can't cut down oak trees without going through a process. So they identify a lot of that for us. This gets into a little bit deeper cost estimating that brings us a little bit closer to what we're going to need to do. Then we work at planning workshops. So they'll meet with the various stakeholders. They'll come in and talk to some of the people in the different buildings or departments to learn a little bit more about how they function, how they work. If we're looking at building a school or something like that, they'll come in and meet with some of the staff to find out how that building functions and how we interact with as a culture in our buildings and how we deliver that. So there's planning workshops. Then they would also include some workshops with the board to make sure that they were able to understand where we're at on that if desired. From that, they create conceptual designs, which we will take from that. And that's kind of what we go out and market with bonds and future planning. So we have something that we can take back and show people. So currently we're looking at or have started some pre-design feasibility studies. We're in the process of working with an architect doing some work on Lockburn Middle School. It's a very early feasibility study because of some of the site challenges that we know that exist there. So it's not as a deep dive as we might get into in some cases yet. So we're trying to identify what can we do on that site? What are the limitations that are going to restrict us? So we can kind of guide us down to the path. There's a lot of trees, there's a lot of obstacles that we have to kind of filter out and figure out which model we're going to be able to use on that site. We don't have another location for a middle school, so we have to figure out how we're going to do that on that site. Elementary school replacement or Clover Park High School modernization and addition. This is a project that's been brought up 3 times in our facility advisory committees over the past probably 8-10 years. And the recommendations been to renovate and remodel the school and do an addition to it. So we have done a lot of work on that. Like we've come up with a feasibility study for the PAC and even some additional type stuff, but it all has to be updated because it's pretty aged at this point in time. We don't have a timeline for starting that yet, but it is going to be in the forefront that we're going to have to start talking about as we develop this plan. Elementary school replacement. We're looking at having somebody look at a elementary school with a larger capacity, so we can look at what are our options with our elementaries. We have a lot of elementaries. They're small capacity, high cost, bad condition. So we're looking at what can we do with these? And one of those would be to be looking at a larger school, where can we put it, and what some consolidation options might be. We're not naming any schools or anything like that, but we want to be able to bring that to the board so they can see that. And then the last one that we'll talk about later tonight is the early childhood learning capacity expansion. In April, we talked about the shortfall in classes and things like that. We're going to touch a little bit more on that tonight. But tentatively, that is a board action item that we're hoping to take to the September board. And that brings me to the recommendations that where we're at right now. In September at board, we're hoping to bring a proposal to conduct a facility condition assessment and state study survey. We have an estimated cost from the architects and engineers of $500,000 with a tentative board approval for September and a timeline for that report sometime in January or February back to us, and then we would get it on an agenda for the board. And the next one that we're looking at is a pre-design for Clover Park High School. We're still working out the dates, as I said earlier, on when we might be able to bring something on that. We're also looking at, we've started the pre-design feasibility for Lockburn Middle School, which I talked about. We engaged the architect that did Thomas Middle School to actually start that work because they've got a lot of, they know our middle school specs and standards and things like that because they actually just built a school for us. And then the last one that we're looking at bringing forward is the early learning program feasibility and design approval for McGranahan PBK Architects. It's a proposal for 8 classroom addition and site improvements at a cost of $375,000. And this is something that we're hoping to take to the September board as well. And with that, I will stop and see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. My first question is on page 9. And I noticed that the way in which the projects are laid out is different. So on slide 8, you've got Lockburn, then you have Clover Park modernization, then the elementary school replacement, and then early childhood. And then on slide 9, it begins with the elementary school replacement. Is that intentional or?
No, that's just probably how I laid them out. There's no, the two ones that we're really looking at up front is the early learning and the facility condition assessment.
Okay. And then of that estimated cost of the $500,000, you're saying that 78,000 will come back from the state?
Yes.
Okay.
And one question. One, I'm excited about the possibility of a larger capacity elementary school. I think everyone kind of expected Lakewood to not grow very much. That was always the thought. And then the way that the state, they changed the rules of how many ADUs and you could have on your property, and there's a lot of apartments going up. So anyway, I'm glad to see that. I hope that when we're looking at all these, I don't want to start out with portables again. I'm just throwing that out there. They look great, but I'm hoping that for all the future ones, we can just realize that Lakewood is continuing to grow. And then I'm sure we'll learn about it more when we talk about the early learning. We go on to the early learning presentation, but is that expansion still necessary if all the
Yes.
funding goes away? Okay.
Yes. And I think Jen and I'll touch on that when we do that one. It
be
hasn't
patient.
changed a lot.
Okay, great. I'll be patient.
Before we move on to the next one, could you, I want you to get a little provocative here because I think we have to push ourselves into a space where can you talk a little bit about end of life and facility, not specifically which facilities, but the fact that we're approaching end of life in a lot of our facilities, and you have two options. You can continue to sink money into end of life system by system, or you can build new. So maybe just a little bit of what you're seeing. I know these assessments will draw more of that out, but as you're assessing.
What we know so far is, and we've seen a lot of this with some of the older schools already, your plumbing infrastructure, both sewer and domestic water coming in, as is at end of life. They say that pipe is typically a 50-year life cycle. We have several schools that are over 50. We've seen Idlewild, for example, where we already had to go in and tear some of that pipe out because it started leaking underground. These are the things that we're starting to see. The other piece is we talked about portables, and then sometimes when we move kids into classrooms and things like that, most of your older schools don't meet ADA requirements. And when you try and convert a classroom, there's a trigger that will say you have to bring the entire building up. So once you get into a project that's so large, then you're going to trigger ADA requirements. You're going to trigger the energy code requirements. And that's what makes these buildings not feasible to actually put a lot of money into. You have single pane glass windows in some of these schools. They don't meet any energy codes today. So to even get building permits for them is almost impossible.
So some of the provocative language is we have these assessments and feasibility studies, and they're costly. Bond is a provocative because that's taxes. Consolidation is highly provocative when you're in a community like ours where some of our people who are retired went to a school, and then that school could potentially be consolidated with another school into a new named school. So these are the things that I just want to prepare you all for as we further the conversation. Some of that will rise to public comment, that will, and our goal would not to be flash this on to somebody and they wake up one morning and all of a sudden, you know, everything's clear cut and there's a new school coming, you know, it would be creating a space where there's opportunity for listening sessions and for folks to share and for us to share things like what Rick said. Yeah, what do you want to do, community? Because, you know, got to do something. It's growing, Lakewood is growing, and we need to have our facilities be appropriate to the education that students need today.
We're being apparently provocative. One of the pushbacks that you'll receive, I won't be here for the bond, but is you will hear folks say, get your test scores up, and then am I not? Yeah, get your test scores up, and then maybe you can get a new building. I would just make sure that you express that it's more difficult. Like, I'm just going to give the middle schools. I'm very excited to see Lockburn on here. That's been like my number one school for a long time. When you have two new schools, well, three, if you consider Harrison Prep as well, three new schools, and then Lockburn is so old, they walk outside to get to their classrooms, and it's like, I mean, I wouldn't be as excited to go to an older facility and be like, why does everyone else in the district get a new school? And I, just because of where my parents live, this is the school I'm assigned to. And so anyway, I'm just mentioning that because it is a comment that you'll get. And I think it's important, like, kids do better in up-to-date facilities when they are excited about the building that they're going to. I mean, if you've toured any of the middle schools, their technology's up to date, it's exciting, it's fresh, it's clean. And, you know, we do our best with Lockburn, and we haven't had a choice up to this point. You know, we have a lot of schools that need a new building. But anyway, I'm just mentioning that because it's really important to express the other side of that.
I have a follow-up question. Since we had repairs on Idlewild with the sewer, how much did that cost? Just the repairs because of the leak, for example? Oh, okay.
It was an archaeological dig.
Oh.
Literally, as we pulled those pipes out, you could see layers. It was like looking at a cross section of different eras on the pipe. Like, you could see the repair here. You could see it, and it was. Yeah, but I can find out.
I'll add to that a little bit in the sense that when those become emergency repairs, so you pay a premium price for emergency repairs. So, and they had to be done during over a winter break. So we were paying prevailing wages at overtime. And we were paying premium costs because the bidders are minimal at that point in time. So anytime you get in that situation, you're going to pay a premium price, and and you're only going to get the minimal amount of work done
Right.
that you can get done.
Right. There was no system fixed there. It was just, again, we added to the archaeological dig. We added another layer of repair to it yeah.
So Rick, the pre-design and feasibility studies list here, these are the top priorities right now.
Well, for example, the elementaries, those can be used for a lot of different sites, right? So we're looking at that one. Lockburn has been a priority expressed by the superintendent and the leadership team that we needed to address that. And the facility condition or facility advisory committee, as I said, over the last 10 years told us that this is their priority. So that was prioritized by a third party, by the board's advisory committee. So yes. And the early learning is the other one that came up last year as kind of a priority.
I too am very excited about Lockburn because that's kind of been on my radar for quite a while. Yeah, thank you.
I have a quick question that came to mind as we were chatting. So with the early learning feasibility study, that's at the old Southgate Elementary School. What is its end of life? Like, as we're investing more on that site, like, is that going to be?
Yeah. So So this would be a new standing building on the backside of the school that would be able to merge in with the newer part of that school. The older part, the gym and some of those offices, those are at end of life. There's I think it's a 1985 building on there that's in relatively good shape, which is the primary areas of the classrooms right now. The office areas would actually be kind of the next area that's needs to go because they're taking up classroom space, right?
Okay, thank you.
Next report is specifically around capital improvements for the Early Learning Center. So we have both Rick and Executive Director Jennifer Herbold to speak to programming, and Rick will speak to any questions you have around the building.
So the exciting news that we have is that there were some cuts that were made by the ESD because of statewide cuts. So we lost about 40 half-day slots. It affected one classroom. So we had the capacity for 900 at one point. So now we're able to serve about 860 students overall. The great news is that we were able to support through attrition, that all staff were reabsorbed and life is still good at the ELC, but we are down spots. So that is where we are. I mean, the bulk of our locations that where we do support is the Early Learning Center, the old Southgate. So by far, that is the focus, the center. So.
I would add to that because we'd met with Early Learning last year and discussed a little bit about whether it should be a center-based or try to do it in the individual schools. And because of the challenges I talked about with ADA and trying to bring schools up, we really had to settle in on more of a center base because we just can't make some of these classrooms and buildings accessible for the needs of these students.
So the legislature has done their thing, and we know that by 2030, half-day slots for ECAP and Head Start will go away. So for us to remain whole and serve at that 860, we would need approximately 10 more classrooms to be able to fully serve the population that we have right now.
And I'm just going to jump in. We were thinking that might have been 27, 28.
Yeah.
But again, they moved that down the road to 31.
Okay, so last time when we met, we talked about we were talking about 6 to 8 classrooms. We went back and we've had conversations with general contractors. We've had conversations with KCDA, which is kind of the prefab model. And right now we think that 8 million is really closer to being able to do 8 classrooms. So we're kind of settling into those numbers. We're looking at an implementation time from when we want to move forward, once we have design and everything, of about 15 to 24 months, depending on the delivery model that we're looking at. And we've kind of narrowed down 2 delivery models. We had 4 last time. We're looking at a pre-designed prefab, which is the KCDA model still. And we're also looking at a design bid build model, which is your traditional construction model where you basically design it and then go out to bid and the contractors bid on it. The other 2 that we were looking at was a GCCM, which is an alternative bid method for larger projects. This project does not meet that criteria. And then we also looked at a design build, which is a new trend that a lot of districts are going to. After looking at it, if we were to go into that, we have some concerns that we would have very little say into it and the cost overrides and things like that. So we felt like, one, we don't have strong enough specifications and things to walk in and pull that off. And then and you'd be accepting the contractor makes the changes at that point in time. They get to decide if there's a budget shortfall, what they're cutting. So they basically are the designer and the builder in that model. So we didn't feel comfortable with that model necessarily being the best one for Clover Park right now. So, the scope that we're looking at for this project would be an 8-classroom addition. It's about approximately 11,000 square feet. It would give us 8 additional classrooms. It would bring us into ADA compliant restrooms and classrooms that are really age appropriate and designed for the age that we're actually trying to educate in here. So they're designed as an early learning center. The scope would also include site enhancements like the parking lot we know the parking lot's going to have to be added and enhanced. Definitely some landscaping things going on over there that need to be improved. Site drainage is also an issue where we're going to have to do some grading. Then of course the railroad tracks are certainly a major concern of how we can create a buffer back there off the tracks and create that safe environment. And then directional and informational signage, if you've ever been there, it's almost one of the worst buildings to try and find. It's our driveway, but you can't really see it. You drive past it. It's just an ugly location. So we know that we need to do something regardless over there for that. And so our next steps here, as I stated earlier in the other presentation, is really to bring a recommendation to the board to start the proposal for the design and conduct a feasibility assessment. From that, we could go out and get bid documents off of this. We're looking at about a $375,000 estimated cost for this, which if you're not familiar, the state has parameters on size of projects, what architects and engineers can charge for professional fees. On lower projects, it's a little bit, they have a little bit more flexibility, but this is in alignment with that standard that they have out there. And then we're looking at September 8th if there's an interest in moving forward. And I will answer questions.
I think I remember the last presentation about this. That price tag also includes technology and everything else in the classrooms, correct?
Yes, there's the infrastructure that goes into it, and then there's the what we call FF&E, which is we've put the furnishings into it, and technology gets an allocation to take care of those. Now in this price, I do have to clarify, we don't know the impacts of tariffs right now and any cost escalation. So that number is definitely probably going to change or depending on when we decide to move forward.
My question goes with Brian's new playground equipment, additional space.
It probably does not include playground equipment in this part because there is a playground already on site. In the big picture, we'd probably tear down the old gym and things like that. And there's kind of a covered play area there. You also have a very nice play area up above, closer to where this building will be going, along with the other building that can be incorporated. And there's a playground there that could eventually be replaced too. But this number, I can't tell you, really uncovers that right now.
Hi, I'm really excited to see this. I think everybody knows early learning is my passion. So one of the questions or wonderings that I have is around programming and the current percent of the classrooms that are serving children with IEPs, 100% self-contained, and thinking about as we move to this model of a bigger early learning center, what is our vision for inclusion in those programs?
That's near and dear to my heart. I love that question. Yeah, I think this is an awesome opportunity for us to really look at the continuum of services and what we do offer. We've looked at the self-contained model for preschool. It's been that way in Clover Parks as long as we've had, special education preschool. But we do need to develop different systems. So, Head Start will have about 10% due to the grant of children with IEPs in it. ECAP, we do our best to integrate and provide opportunities for kids in there. But there's some limitations with that as well, because the folks that are there aren't certificated special education teachers. So we have some itinerants. So just playing with different models, the dream would be that we would be able to have a wider continuum of services. And the extra space would give us the opportunity to dream, potentially braid funding, all different kinds of things. So.
Because we know the return on investment for early learning just can't be beat. And hopefully when our state's finances settle a little bit more, we will see continued expansion of TK along with ECAP and Head Start.
I'm excited. I have maybe more concerns than others. What percentage of the funding at the Early Learning Center is federal funding?
Excellent question. So Head Start is our federal that serves about 95 of our students that are at the Early Learning Center. So it's a decent amount.
Okay, so the reason why I'm asking, it's like, obviously we have funding for this next year, but we don't know what the funding is going to look like. So say all the funding goes away. Probably not going to happen, but worst case scenario, all the federal funding. Then we lose the 95 spots. Will we still have a use for the building, maybe until a new administration comes in and maybe they have different ideas on early learning? I don't know. I'm just, the hard part for me, I am very pro early education, so has nothing to do with my personal opinion. The issue is the $8 million that we're putting into something that could have a lot of uncertainty in the 26, 27 school year.
So yes, we're not certain. However, we're also, in this case, we're looking at a 30-31 outcome, which we would, as I wrote down here again, gives us the opportunity to look at this in terms of a bond, which, as Rick and I have, conversations, we'd be looking like a 27, 28 timeframe to run the bond. And if that gets voted, then you would start that building. So probably between once you sold the bonds, the January, February, and then it would be after that in 2028 to look to get this rolling. So I think we would have a lot better understanding of what that would look like.
Right. Well, you have several years to, once you sell the bonds, you have multiple years too. So you could even push that back further. It's really about what's the needs and when do you want to try and address those needs? Because most of the stuff we're doing here is bond dependent. So it's going to be, when are we ready to go? And then what's the prioritization? That will be a conversation with the board as to what those priorities are from your perspective. But what we don't want to do is go in and come out and say we're doing something. And then in the past, we'd go ask our facility advisory committee, and then the board didn't really have any insight on it. So we were kind of setting you up for failure because people are saying do this and they've already made the decisions, where this time we're coming to the board, making sure you guys are aware of what we're doing before we go back, because we can't keep inviting people back and then not doing anything.
I would also just add that if all of the ECAP funding went away, we're still going to have an early learning need. So we would be petitioning if all of the Head Start funding went away, we still have that need. We would be looking to bolster the slots for ECAP, right? We would be pushing hard to increase that, either from the Puget Sound ESD or we become our own contractor for ECAP grant.
I guess I forgot that we were doing a design bid build. So I guess all we're approving right now is for the feasibility.
Right.
So that will take a little while. So I guess it's good to have that regardless of what the potential outcome could be. Okay.
Well, and Alyssa, if you look back on page 2.2, it shows that it's just 11% of the early learning program is Head Start funded, which is the federal funding. So that's a very small percentage compared to ECAP, which is state funded. And then the special ed preschool, which is a blend of funding, some of which is federal. But that's been enacted in law for so long under IDEA, it would be not impossible to undo, but it would be pretty hard to undo.
Yep.
One more question, just because my brain isn't remembering. Is the architect proposal, is that the same architects who did Thomas Middle as well?
No, this architect actually did Clover Park High School years ago. That firm did. It's now since been purchased, bought out, and it's merged with other architect firms, but they're a reputable school district architectural firm in the area, and they're in Tacoma, so it's a local.
Hey, thank you both. I appreciate you. Oh, Rick, you get to stick around for one more conversation.
Sure.
So the next conversation is less of a report and more of a conversation around transportation, potential impacts to transportation, both in the city based on road closures and street construction projects, as well as gate closures out at JBLM. And Rick and I were with the Garrison Command team on Friday afternoon. And we had a few conversations, and there are going to be some gate closures and what I call rolling gate closures, which means they close this one, they're going to open this one, and they're going to close this, you know, and so it's going to kind of be this domino thing with what we know at this time. Because you will all see the Facebook posts or get the emails or the phone calls when buses are late or we anticipate buses will be late. We're going to be working to try to get things settled as soon as possible. And that's a regular year. This is going to be a bumper crop year of late transportation because routes are going to shift mid-quarter. Things are happening that are out of our control, but then we're going to bring whatever locus of control we can bring to it. So I know you just had a meeting with the city today.
Yes, we did. I'll start with the city. So there's two major projects in the city. Nyanza roadway is the big one that I think everybody's familiar with. It doesn't have a lot of impact on us. There's a few students there that have been asked to walk out to a different pickup spot. So we don't see a lot of problems there. There's been multiple communications via the transportation, mostly by email, as my understanding. Letting parents know this. That timeline we think is going to be somewhere around November, December before that's all done. That might be stretched out a little bit because they started that one before. The big impact is going to be the Idlewild project that they're doing sidewalks in that area down Idlewild. And we just learned about that last week and they're starting work tomorrow. It's now, in all fairness, it was on their website. So, but we didn't have good communication, getting information and stuff back. And nobody really recognized the impact this could have on a school. So, our teams have been running, trying to figure out solutions. The city's been responsive. We came up with a plan today. Last Friday, our risk manager and transportation or operations and maintenance director went out and met with the city or the project managers from the contractor. They made some adjustments. We had a big meeting with all the stakeholders, transportation, city officials. We think we have a solution. The building principal, Tess McCartan, the elementary ed executive director was there as well. And they're working on the communication with parents right now. So they developed some communication. We'll monitor it. And we're going to have some further follow-up meetings on it because we think it's going to be a little bit challenging because it's basically it kind of dead ends heading which direction? I think north. will be a dead end at our property line. So, and then you'll come in our driveway and you're gonna have to make a left-hand turn to go back the other direction. So there'll be cars coming down that direction, but they're gonna put a temporary stop sign up, so they have to stop and make that turn. But if you've ever been over at Idlewild during the day when parents are picking up their kids at the end of the day, it's quite chaotic and not a lot of places to park and stuff. So we expect some significant challenges with this. Principal's on top of it, his supervisor's on top of it. Our maintenance department's providing some support, our risk management department's providing some support. But we do know that it's gonna be a little bit of a challenge to work through this the next few days. So those are the two in the city of Lakewood that are kind of the latest challenges. Jay,
Jump in really
Yeah.
quick. 2/3 of the Idlewild, in general, 2/3 of the Idlewild students waiver into the school for the K-5 IB programming. And so this is not a system that you can throw a bus route at, because we don't know where they're waiver, right? It would be bouncing all the way, and we don't have the drivers to do that. So I'm saying out loud, publicly, expect to see this as complaints, frustrations through the various venues. And we will be working on it, as Rick said. And so this is what happens when you learn on Friday that something's going to be closed next Wednesday. And
So
honestly, we thought it was going to be a one-way street, or one-way traffic flow, and it sounds like it still might be with
well,
a
it's still gonna be a
turnaround.
one-way going one direction, and then you can come both directions in front of the school, but you can't go beyond that. So, and it was that way until our team went out and met with them on Friday, and they made some adjustments. And kudos to both Mona, our risk manager, and John, our operations and maintenance director. They did an awesome job. I think,
Are-
Rick, you might have been there too.
are we anticipating asking the Lakewood Police Department to support?
I don't know, typically they would be working with the contractor. We're gonna see what is, and then we'll see if there's a need for, and again, I don't know what their capacity is to send an officer, but we'll see how things go the first couple days, and then we'll, yeah.
There is a component in the contract the city has with the contractor that if, for certain circumstances, the contractor is obligated to do traffic control. So, so we may be asking that. They're going to start with a stop sign, but if it's too much, then we'll ask for somebody to actually stand there and hold signs up and direct traffic.
Thing that I heard you say that I think is going to be important for us to continue to message is that when we found out that this was happening, you met with folks and changes were made to make it better than it could have been. So I just think that's an important message to keep reiterating out in the community that yes, it's problematic and it's as good as we could make it for now.
Yeah, I think it really did help because they, when they were out there, I was told that a couple cars decided they weren't gonna go, they decided they were going down either way, and they saw firsthand what how some of those people might be that just refused to follow the rules and stuff. So that helped trigger more people getting involved, so.
I have a quick question, if that's okay. So will it be possible for the board to get the communication information that's being sent out to parents, families, so that, when we get calls or emails or whatever, we know what we're talking about?
Absolutely. We'll put something together, or work with Leanna to kind of build that messaging piece, and then whatever is being produced, we'll make sure that you have copies of it.
So for JBLM, there are definitely some challenges this year for transportation. The D Street gate, which is the North Fort gate, it's been closed into that housing area back there. Last year JBLM had opened it up for us, and would open it just for our school buses to get in. Then a personal owned vehicle ran into the gate and damaged the gate. And then now JBLM has facing some sort of cutbacks from DOD. So their civilian staff are being cut back. So they are now once again closing that gate. So that means our buses have to go over to the Integrity Gate, which is over off Stilcomb and DuPont Road, which means they have to go down to the light. That if you ever sat there, it's like 17 seconds to make a left-hand turn and a minute the other direction. They have acknowledged that that's been fixed and told us if it isn't fixed, that they will do it, take care of it right away. But there's 20 buses that go that way, servicing basically Lakes High School, Thomas Middle School, Meriwether Elementary, and they do it twice a day. So it can have significant impacts on our route times, potentially kids getting home late, typically in the afternoons, or getting to school late because they can't get on the base or they can't get to the school from one school to the other. That's what we experienced before, and that problem when they opened the gates kind of went away for us. The other gate that's going to be closed is the Berkeley Madigan gate. So we don't have a timeline, but we do believe it'll be in September. And we've already built our routes around that gate being closed. So we're starting out, so we don't have to start and then change them in 3 to 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So transportation's already accounted for that. It will have additional labor cost to us and some delays on where they go. And then the Woodbrook McCord housing gate, same situation. They used to open that gate for us. That's the one straight off of Gravelly Lake. You go straight across, that goes into the Madigan housing area there. They would have somebody opening that gate for us as well. Not as many buses, but it will have some impacts on Hillside, Clover Park, Lockburn, and some HP routes. So, because now they're going to have to go through the McCord gate, which backs up worse than most of the gates out there right now.
Keeping in mind that whatever traffic situations at the gate are now, they will be compounded because when one gate closes, the traffic, as Rick just said, gets diverted. So it's not just our buses that are getting diverted to those gates. It's all traffic that normally goes through those gates. So
just wondering about being proactive. Bored children can cause challenging behaviors, and the longer they're on the bus, the more likely they are to get bored. So do we have some strategies in place for keeping kids, especially younger ones, engaged on the bus?
Well, I've only been back for a short time, but I'll let Ron answer that.
yeah, they have their cell phones, which they are allowed to have. But when we talk about some of our special needs students, we tend to have, built into whether it's an individual education plan or just in general, some things on the bus, and we'll revisit that. If you have a smaller number of students on a bus, that's a lot easier. If you have a larger number of students, then no, give me that. No, it's my turn, right? So are you creating more? Then you just deal with hey, put your headphones on and we'll get you there. So that's kind of a play it by ear moment. When we have some of our students that are definitely in need of distractions while they're on the bus, then we'll look at that a little more deeply at the beginning. But in general, we'll kind of play it by ear.
I would add that our driver's been trained in some PBS strategies and things like that. So they have some of those tools, especially at the elementary level.
That concludes our reports for this evening. Rick, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Next on the agenda is what you all love, is the general session is coming up. I think, let me make sure I'm not jumping through anything. And so Carmen has put together your, I'll call it consensus packet. She's asked if you could return your vote, so review your packet and return your decision, what your individual decision would be by September 3. And then she will have that collated for you to have a discussion at the September 8 board meeting. Remember, the ultimate outcome of that is it supports the legislative rep going into the General Assembly to vote pass or do not pass based on a voice of one from the board. Carmen also put together for us is kind of a one pager to follow through on steps 1 through 5. Review the General Assembly packet. There are 27 glorious pages to read. Proposal details. Number 3, board member responsibilities. Again, it's the check the pass, do not pass. Keeping in mind there that if there are 3 passes, it moves forward. And I think you all determined that if there were more than 1 no, you would open it for discussion, or?
Obviously, we're not going to talk about the ones that everyone says do pass or everyone says do not pass. It's yes, if there's 2, we consider that the equivalent to a motion and a second. It's not really, but just like theoretically. And those are the ones we'll talk about. Unless one person voted no and is super, or, voted against it or the opposite way, and you're super passionate about it and you want to talk about it, then we can make an exception. But typically when I'm going through them in an effort to save a little bit of time, I just go through to find the ones that it's 3-2. So 3 one way and 2 the other, so that we can talk about it and make sure that everyone is on the same page. There's usually very little of them, like 1 or 2.
And it does provide opportunity, which it should, to, as a board, discuss, leave at the end with, yep, we're moving in this way, but nobody's voice is silenced.
And just as a reminder, there was one issue last year where we didn't have the proper information about it was Native American, there was a term that wasn't clear, and that did impact our position. I'd have to look back, but it was something that it was some kind of definition dealing with taxes on construction. Coming back.
And if you have a question, we can certainly help facilitate getting an answer. I would also, though, recommend that you reach out directly to Tricia Lubbock, the executive director for WASDA, because if there's an intent on language, we're not going to know what their intent on language was. And that's just one extra person. Again, happy to do that work and reach out, but you're just looking at a potential delay, right? And you guys are WASDA members, and you certainly have the right, I guess, I don't know a better word, but to reach out directly to them to say, hey, we're looking at this. What is it you guys meant by this? So that you can leave understanding. So September 3 is Wednesday, next Wednesday. And so if Carmen doesn't see it by September 3rd, she will of course be email knocking at your doors so that she can have it ready. And the goal is to have it ready so that you guys can see it by that weekend. We can have it out to you so that you can look at it and decide what the conversation will be like. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
Maybe I missed this, but the handbook, are we able to take that?
Yeah, that's yours.
So this is ours. Okay, thank you.
If you bring back your handbook to the next meeting.
No, I can't do that.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sorry. No, yeah, I certainly will.
We need to save the color copy ink for the Early Learning Center. Again, as we discussed earlier, a link will come to you as board president, and then we'll push that to the legislative rep. And I think other than executive session.
Yeah, all right. So that concludes the bulk of our meeting. We do have an executive session tonight regarding a complaint against an employee and 30-minute.
I think maximum 30 minutes. Lori, 30 minutes max.
Okay, so we'll be back in 30 minutes or less. Thank you, everyone. Good. Okay, we're back. It is 6:52. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, moved by Director Thomas, seconded by Director Caldwell. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.